I pursued Kingston for 7 years and have been married for 4 years. Everyone knows he has an unforgettable first love, but I always like to deceive myself. I thought, as long as we have the fruit of love, would he care for me a little? But the answer is already very clear. He won't. On the second day of the new year, Kingston promised to accompany me back to my hometown. On the highway, he was driving, clearly distracted. I was teasing my 1-month-old son from behind. "Honey, look at our son. He's so cute. When he grows up, he'll definitely be just as charming and popular with girls as you are." Kingston just tugged at the corner of his mouth and did not respond. Just when the atmosphere in the car was warm and cozy, Kingston's phone rang inappropriately. After seeing the caller ID, a slight ripple appeared on Kingston's calm face. He parked the car directly by the roadside, and I reminded him that this is a highway and parking is not allowed. He just gestured for me to be quiet. The voice on the other end of the phone came through directly. "Kingston, I'm back. I'm at the airport now. Can you come pick me up?" My mind is a mess. This voice is none other than Nora, who abandoned him back then. Nora is an existence in his heart that cannot be desecrated, and I have always known it. I stared at him intently, and Kingston was silent for a few seconds before he spoke into the phone. "Wait for me. I'm coming over right now." My heart immediately sank to the bottom. "Today is the second day of the new year. You promised to accompany me back to my family home. You can have your secretary pick me up." I tried to salvage the situation. Without waiting for me to finish speaking, Kingston spoke directly. "Get out of the car." I almost thought I heard wrong. Uncertain, I spoke again. "What did you say?" Kingston frowned and spoke again. "Get out of the car. I'll have my secretary come to pick you up." We were at a standstill at the highway entrance, the cold wind howling outside. Even for the sake of the child, I absolutely could not get out of the car. It's several degrees below zero outside. Are you trying to kill us by getting out of the car at a time like this? Kingston, even if you don't love me, this is your own son. Kingston has never liked women who are unreasonable. I know that all too well. But now for the sake of my son, I cannot compromise. I tried to continue persuading, but Nora's call came in again. "Kingston, are you here? I'm so scared being alone at the airport." This phone call was like the last straw that broke the camel's back. Kingston no longer hesitated and issued me the final ultimatum. "Get out of the car." I held my son tightly in the swaddling blanket, silently refusing. "Eileen, I'll count to 3. If you don't get out of the car, the Hua group will terminate all cooperation with the Jiang group." He paused and continued. "You wouldn't want your parents, at their age, to be begging on the streets, would you?" I stared at him in disbelief, my eyes wide open. Tears were welling up in my eyes, and I bit my teeth to hold them back. In this game, I lost completely. The car sped past me, the cold wind whipping against my face. It really hurt, but it was nothing compared to the pain in my heart. I drove on the highway for more than 3 hours until I collapsed by the roadside from exhaustion. A kind passerby called an ambulance for me, which prevented both me and the baby from dying on the highway. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying on a hospital bed. I frantically asked about my child until the nurse brought the child over, and only then did I feel a little relieved. The nurse looked at me and asked, "Where is the child's father? Please come with me to the front desk to pay the fee." I pressed my dry lips together and then spoke. "Can I borrow your phone to make a call?" Under the nurse's surprised gaze, I called my brother. My brother arrived quickly, and our parents came along as well. After learning about the situation, the brother angrily scolded, "Eileen, don't worry, I will definitely get justice for you." Mom held the baby, her face filled with anger. "The Hor family is really bullying us too much." Dad said in a deep voice, "Eileen, what do you think? If you want a divorce, Dad will fully support you. I disagreed with your marriage from the very beginning. The Hor family is large and prosperous. We can't afford to climb that high, nor do we want to. If it weren't for you forcing us with your hunger strike, we wouldn't have agreed at all. Kingston is not bad, but my daughter is not inferior either. Why should we allow him to humiliate us like this? Terminate the cooperation. Does he really think we are begging for their collaboration? If it weren't for the fear of you being wronged in his house, why would I let him take a third of the profit every time we cooperate? I looked bewildered and asked, "What is the 3-point profit?" Brother angrily spoke up. The Hoare family always approaches cooperation with an air of superiority, as if they are bestowing charity. Dad is afraid you'll be wronged, and even more afraid that their family will look down on you, so every time we cooperate, we end up giving away a third of the profits. To put it bluntly, we are working for the Hoare family for free. Yet even so, Mom and Dad have no complaints, only hoping that you can live well. My brother also said a lot, venting his dissatisfaction with the Hoare family. It was only then that I realized how much my family had given up for me. Thinking of my own actions, I covered my face and cried out in anguish. After venting, I finally spoke up. "I've made my decision. I want a divorce." I pushed the divorce agreement onto Kingston's desk. Kingston paused his work, and after seeing the words "divorce agreement," he frowned. "Can you stop looking for trouble when there's none? Let's get a divorce." "Kingston, I'm tired. The child will stay with me, and I don't want a single penny of your property," I said dandanda. After a 7-year love affair, it couldn't be better for me to end this failed marriage with my own words. "I'm not making a scene. I'm speaking to you very seriously." I looked straight into his eyes. "Nora is back, and I think you want a divorce too. Give her a title. I'll make it happen for you both." Kingston pushed back the divorce agreement and said calmly, "If it's just for Nora, there's no need to engage in such a big fight. She won't take your place. If you have nothing else to do, go out. I have to deal with official duties." I pushed the divorce agreement over again. "You're overthinking it. It's not for anyone. It's just that I've come to understand some things clearly. I was young and ignorant before, and now I've recognized myself. I don't want to make the same mistake again. Just sign the divorce agreement. It's good for both you and me." Kingston paused his work, looked up at me again. "Are you serious?" "Very serious," I said decisively. Perhaps my attitude provoked his dignity as a man, and he no longer said much. He simply took the divorce agreement, confirmed there were no issues, and then signed his name at the end. Before signing, he paused and then spoke. "Nora and I are innocent. She just returned to the country and has no one. What's wrong with me picking her up? Only dirty people see everything as dirty." I tugged at the corner of my mouth and urged, "Sign it." Seeing my resolute attitude, Kingston no longer sought to make things difficult for himself and swiftly signed his name. The force was so great that it tore the paper. It seemed to be a release of his inner dissatisfaction. I reached out to grab the divorce agreement, pulled at it, and found that I couldn't pull it out. I looked at the man across from me with a questioning gaze. "Eileen, I'll say it one last time. My relationship with Nora is completely innocent, not what you think it is. If you're thinking of divorcing me out of anger, there's absolutely no need." I was taken aback for a moment. My impression was that Kingston had always been sparing with his words. Even when I was hurt, Kingston would only casually say, "Take a good rest." The hint of retention in his tone was too obvious, so obvious that I began to reevaluate this marriage. But it's only for a moment. I shook my head. "Kingston, those things have nothing to do with me anymore. Let's part on good terms." This indifferent attitude ultimately infuriated him. He raised his hand and directly threw the divorce agreement in front of me. Then he lowered his head to handle his work. I held the divorce agreement and let out a sigh of relief. It was not until the sound of the door closing that Kingston shifted his gaze to the wedding ring on his finger, his eyes clouded and inscrutable. The moment I received the divorce certificate, I immediately posted on Facebook. In less than a moment, Kingston's mother's call came through. I pondered for a moment and decided to answer the phone. "Eileen, what are you thinking? Do you want others to see the joke of the Hoare family? Do you know how much getting a divorce now will affect Kingston? I shouldn't have agreed to you two being together in the first place." Kingston's mother panted, listing all my faults. "I have already divorced Kingston. This matter is set in stone. If there's nothing else, I will block this number, and we will have no further interactions." Kingston's mother became even angrier upon hearing this. "Is this your attitude as a daughter-in-law?" I interrupted directly. "I am no longer your daughter-in-law. Kingston and Nora are in love. You should support them. As for the child, he is the grandson of the Hoare family. If you want to see him, I won't stop you. Kingston's mother was even angrier. That woman Nora, how is she worthy of my son? I didn't want to hear her opinion about Nora, so I hung up the phone abruptly. The phone rang again, and I hung up once more. This time, I directly blocked and deleted the whole service. On the other side, Kingston and Nora met at the cafe. Nora talked about the interesting things between them, while Kingston responded half-heartedly. Kingston, are you still thinking about Eileen? It's all my fault. If I hadn't called you, Eileen wouldn't have gotten angry with you because of this. Nora said, her face full of guilt. It's none of your business. Don't overthink it. Kingston comforted, his fingers intentionally and unintentionally rubbing the wedding ring. Eileen picked this diamond ring, and at that time, he thought it was too ugly, took a glance, and turned to leave. Eileen chased out from behind and ended up brushing past a large truck, twisting her ankle, and stayed in the hospital for a month. The doctor said this is a blessing in disguise for her. Kingston only thought that Eileen was out of her mind. It was just a ring. Was it worth risking her life over? Eileen replied foolishly, "This wedding ring means something extraordinary to me. It's more important than my life." Seeing Eileen's pitiful situation, he reluctantly put on the wedding ring. But since he put it on, he had never taken it off. Kingston was deep in thought, and Nora's expression grew increasingly grim. She could sense that this time, Kingston's heart was completely elsewhere. Just as the two were having a lively conversation, Kingston's mother came over. She was fierce and immediately slapped Nora, declaring that as long as she was alive, Nora would never set foot in the Hoare family's door. My best friend, who happened to witness this scene in the cafe, immediately recorded a video and sent it to me. Eileen, this is what they call good, and evil will eventually be rewarded. It's not that there's no retribution, it's just that the time hasn't come yet. Ha, this is so satisfying to watch, said my best friend with a big laugh. How dare she brazenly be a mistress? She really deserves it. You don't know, when Kingston's mother was beating him up, Nora didn't dare to fight back and could only keep dodging. And Kingston, a devoted son, was so afraid of hurting his mother in the scuffle that he could only endure the beating. It was quite a ridiculous scene. I rubbed my brow and said helplessly, "You should watch less of these dramas. Don't let the innocent get caught up in it." On the third day after the divorce from Kingston, the news spread. Partners rushed to demand contract termination. The family business has plummeted, and my brother is overwhelmed every day. I can only accompany him to minimize the losses. And Kingston's mother also made it known in the business world. Whoever dares to cooperate with the Jiang Group is an enemy of the Hoare family. A month later, the Jiang family announced bankruptcy. The once grand villa has turned into a small commercial space of less than 100 square meters. Nevertheless, no one in the family complained about me. The more this was the case, the guiltier I felt. I called Kingston, questioning him about what he really wanted. Even if there is no love, we were at least husband and wife. Do you really have to go to such extremes? Kingston paused for a moment, then said, "My mom must be wanting a grandson. You bring one back and take good care of her, and this matter will be settled. As for the Jiang Group, I can bring it back to life." I was instantly infuriated and laughed. "My family went bankrupt because of you, and you want me to flatter her with a smile? You want me to revive my company, and I should be grateful to you?" Kingston frowned. "Eileen, can you stop being so sharp-tongued? You weren't like this before. Before, I loved you. You were more important than my life. Now that I don't love you anymore, you are nothing," I said coldly, continuing, "But there is one thing you are right about. I really need to have a good talk with the old lady." Without waiting for Kingston to speak, I hung up the phone directly. In just a short month, the hair of both parents has turned much grayer. My brother, despite his young age, seems to have aged 10 years. It's all my fault. If I hadn't provoked the Hoare family, they wouldn't be out there struggling at their age, humbling themselves to others in search of a job. Moved into a dilapidated neighborhood, where the sanitation was poor, causing the child to develop a high fever the next day. My brother and I hurriedly took the child to the hospital. The doctor's examination results came out quickly. The child has developed pneumonia due to the fever and needs to be closely monitored. The child is too young to use medication, as it may have adverse effects. I hurriedly called Kingston. Kingston skipped the meeting and rushed over, closely followed by Nora. After understanding the situation from the doctor, Kingston directly called the Hoare family's medical team and asked them to come immediately. This commotion directly alarmed Kingston's mother. Kingston's mother declared, "If you want to save the child, fine, but only if you give up custody. Otherwise, I would rather the child die here today." My lips trembled with anger, and my brother rushed forward wanting to hit someone, but was stopped by a bodyguard beside him. Kingston frowned and said softly, "Mom, saving the child is the priority. We can talk about custody later." Before the words were finished, Kingston's mother interrupted. "Shut up, you have no say here. Eileen, you better think carefully. It's up to you whether to watch the child burn to death or to give up the child. It's all in your hands." Looking at the child's flushed little face, my teeth chattered, and I had no choice but to give up. I collapsed onto the hospital corridor, and Kingston wanted to say something, but he hesitated. Nora whispered, "Kingston, it's good to bring the child back to the Hoare family. Their medical team can definitely cure the child. Eileen, if you want to be with the child, perhaps we can remarry." As soon as Kingston said this, Nora's expression turned sour. Kingston's expression was slightly unnatural. He was used to giving orders from a position of authority, and this kind of negotiating tone was a first for him. Kingston didn't know, but Nora understood clearly. When Kingston said that sentence, his eyes were filled with hope. He was hoping for a remarriage. I tugged at the corner of my mouth and directly supported my brother, who was bruised and battered by the bodyguards, as we walked towards the hospital entrance. Silence was a wordless rejection. Kingston's expression also turned grim. "Kingston, go back. Eileen doesn't love you. No matter how much you try to please her, it won't work." Perhaps the words "please" touched the most sensitive part of his heart. Kingston's expression darkened. If it weren't for the child, she would never set foot in the Hoare family's door again. It is unclear whether this was said for Nora to hear or as a form of self-comfort. After 3 days of feeling dejected, my brother suddenly called, his tone very anxious. "Eileen, you need to come to the hospital quickly. Dad is injured." I couldn't care about much and rushed to the hospital in a hurry. After understanding the situation, I was even more filled with a gnawing hatred. Dad got into an argument with someone while working and was hit on the head by that person on the spot. One bystander, fearing that the commotion might lead to a fatality, called for an ambulance to help. The doctor said that fortunately they arrived in time. If they had come any later, their life would not have been saved. The elder brother gritted his teeth and said with hatred, "It's that woman next to Kingston. I saw her give a sum of money, and the person receiving the money is the one who is arguing with Dad." My fists are clenched tightly, and a strong hatred bursts forth from the depths of my eyes. The family needs to pay $100,000 in hospitalization fees at the front desk first, and after conservative treatment, it is expected to cost around $1 million more. The family should prepare in advance. The doctor's words were like a heavy bombshell. My face was pale as a sheet. Ever since the Hoare family ruined us, and we went bankrupt, all the valuable items in the house have been sold off. 100,000 yuan is undoubtedly an astronomical figure for the Jiang family now. My brother comforted me. "Eileen, don't worry just yet. I have a few friends. I'll borrow from them, and we should be able to make it work." After finishing speaking, my brother went to the hallway to make a phone call. When those people heard about borrowing money, they all made excuses and said they were busy. When I called back, it was turned off. Former friends are worthless in the face of profit. I hid in the corner, pressing my lips tightly together to keep myself from crying out. Adjusting my emotions, I walked over, snatched my brother's phone, and said, "There's no need to look for them anymore. I brought some gold jewelry when I left the Hoare family, enough to cover the hospital fees." My brother's suspicious gaze roamed back and forth across my face, and only after I repeatedly assured him did he let me go out. After hesitating for a long time, I finally dialed Kingston's number. The phone rang a few times, but it was Nora who answered. Is there something you need? Kingston is currently taking a shower. I hung up the phone directly and gave myself a hard slap. Clearly, the Hoare family has already pushed us to the brink of bankruptcy, yet I still held a glimmer of hope for Kingston. How foolish of me! My fingers flicked back and forth on the contacts page. Suddenly, a name forgotten deep in my mind caught my eye. Parker, would he help me? I trembled as I dialed that number. Then, in a panic, I hung up. Thinking of the past, what reason did he have to help me? Just as I was about to put it back in my pocket, the phone rang. My pupils dilated sharply. It was Parker, clearly wanting to hang up, but the finger unconsciously pressed the answer button. There was no sound over there, and I didn't dare make a sound either. After a while, that side finally spoke. Eileen? I responded with a sound. Then there was a long silence again. Just as I was hesitating whether to hang up the phone, Parker's voice rang out again. Have you cried? Before I could speak, he continued, I thought you would have a much better life after marrying Kingston, but it seems that's not the case. I know the reason you're looking for me. Meet me at the old place. Parker said, and hung up the phone. Upon arriving at the Goof family's amusement park, the front desk directly took me to the 6th floor. There, it was once a secret space that belonged solely to Parker and me, where no one was allowed to tread. In the 6th floor billiard room, Parker tossed the cue stick to me. Come on, let's have a match first. If you win, I'll agree to all your requests. My eyes lit up, but having not played for a long time, my skills had become quite rusty, and I barely managed to score 2 goals. Parker scoffed. It seems the Hoare family has really spoiled you. As he spoke, he skillfully hit one ball after another. All 10 balls went into the hole, and I lost completely. The Goof family and the Hoare family are both prominent families that dominate the business world. At school, Parker has always been very good to me, but in my eyes and heart, there is only one Kingston. Speak. How much do you need? Seeing my embarrassment, Parker asked. 1 million. I mustered up the courage to speak. Tiske, DSK, just 1 million can make the once lofty Miss Jeong so wronged and compromising. Parker raised an eyebrow. The money can be lent, but what will you use to repay it? I can help you bring down the Hoare family. Once the Hoare family collapses, all the benefits will naturally fall into the Goof family's pockets. Parker laughed and said casually, sounds good, but why do I feel like you're trying to use the Goof family's hand to take revenge for yourself? I shrugged noncommittally. You want the Hoare family to go bankrupt. I want revenge. Each to their own. Being with Parker, I also relaxed, completely without the caution I had when I was with Kingston. Parker looked at me with appreciation, then leaned slightly closer to my ear, his warm breath brushing against me. He slowly spoke. Actually, you have another choice. For example? I took a step back, keeping a certain distance from him. Be my wife, Parker said with a smile, extending the invitation. I was taken aback for a moment, then shook my head. No, the Goof family's threshold is too high. I can't reach it. Just collaborating like this is pretty good. We both get what we need. Parker picked up the conversation. And then? The bridge is the bridge. The road is the road. Never to meet again. I pressed my lips together in silence. The man in front scoffed. You really are as heartless as ever. Since we've reached an agreement, can I borrow you for a moment? Before the sentence was finished, the phone rang. After the phone connected, my brother's voice came through. Eileen, be honest with me. Where did you go to raise Dad's medical expenses? The doctor just told me it's all paid, and they even let Dad stay in a VIP room. I was shocked. Eileen, you didn't do anything to compromise yourself, did you? After comforting her brother for a few moments, she finally hung up the phone. I raised my phone. Did you do this? As a partner, am I sincere enough? Parker continued. In return, you have to accompany me to a banquet this afternoon. Seeing my hesitation, Parker directly interrupted my worries. The hospital your dad is in is mine. I've arranged for bodyguards to take care of him around the clock. Not a single hair on your family will be harmed. I whispered while clutching the hem of my clothes. But I don't have a suitable dress. I'm afraid I'll embarrass you. At a commercial banquet like this, the number of dignitaries and nobles is countless, and those who can invite the Gu family are certainly not ordinary people. Parker smiled. I've been ready for a long time. He walked over to the shelf beside him, reached out, and directly pulled down the huge curtain. A dazzling golden evening gown suddenly caught my eye. The expensive silk threads, high-end craftsmanship, paired with a pure handmade fishtail design, made it clear that it was worth a fortune. I asked him when he prepared this gift dress, and he just smiled and remained silent. The ceremonial dress fits on the body as if it were tailor-made. Before entering the venue, Parker extended his hand. I nodded in understanding and stepped forward to link my arm with his. At the venue, it was no surprise to encounter Kingston and Nora. As soon as Parker and I walked in, a collective gasp filled the room. The combination of handsome men and beautiful women is always the audience's favorite. Countless envious gazes surrounded me as people stepped forward to chat with Parker. For a moment, I was pushed into a corner, and I felt quite comfortable with it. A shadow descended, and my wrist was suddenly grabbed. Let go. I looked coldly at the man in front of me. Kingston's grip clearly tightened. What is your relationship with Parker? It's none of your business. I replied coldly. No wonder you're in a hurry to distance yourself from me. It turns out you've hooked up with the Gu family. Do you think Parker is some kind of good-natured fool? Being with him, you'll end up with nothing left of you, not even the bones. Kingston's eyes were almost spitting fire. I'll say it again, let go. I raised an eyebrow at the man in front of me. The angrier he got, the happier I became. Kingston wouldn't want me to call for help in front of everyone, would he? Kingston looked at me with a strange gaze. Eileen, don't be ungrateful. Seeing that I remained unmoved, Kingston directly grabbed my wrist, and with a forceful tug, he pulled me up. His actions were extremely rude, and a sharp pain shot through my wrist. He pulled me and headed towards the exit of the venue. I frowned. Kingston, you. Shut up. Kingston interrupted me rudely, as if he had eaten gunpowder. Just as I reached the entrance, a voice came from behind. Where does Kingston want to take my girlfriend? Parker smiled, reaching out with a big hand and directly grabbing my other arm. Eileen is my wife, Mr. Kingston. Isn't that inappropriate? Kingston glared at Parker's hand gripping my arm, wishing he could just chop it off. As far as I know, Mr. Kingston is divorced, and his current girlfriend is this Miss Nora, right? So, is Kingston thinking of going back? But it seems this Miss Nora is not too willing. Parker continued to smile innocently, directly pointing the arrow at Nora, who was watching the drama from the side. Nora's face turned pale, and then flushed red. Kingston, can we talk about this when we get back? You're making it very difficult for me. Nora tugged at Kingston's shirt corner, pleading softly. Kingston didn't even raise an eyebrow. Parker, let go. It should be Kingston who lets go. Parker retorted, not backing down at all. The invisible contest between the two men spread out at this moment. There were those who were confused, those who were watching the show, and those who were ready to step in and mediate. In the end, after some thought, none of them got involved. With the city gate on fire, they feared being caught in the crossfire. I could only feel that both of my arms were about to be dislocated by their pulling, and beads of cold sweat were trickling down my forehead. Don't you see she's in pain? Let go already. As the two men were about to fight, Nora felt an overwhelming sense of shame and anger. After giving me a fierce glare, she ran out of the venue. A voice timely intervened, breaking the tense atmosphere. The newcomer was none other than the host of this auction, and in terms of seniority, Kingston and Parker had to respectfully address him as Uncle He. Someone has already stepped in. If this continues, it won't look good for anyone. Kingston released his grip, but his gaze remained fixed on my face. Don't leave yet. I have something to tell you. As always, his tone was commanding. As always, it was irritating. I frowned and remained silent. Parker instinctively shielded me behind him, still smiling. Kingston can just talk to me directly. My girlfriend is afraid of unfamiliar men. It's not convenient. Kingston glanced at me deeply and turned back to his place. At the auction, everyone had different thoughts. I rubbed the bruised spot on my arm and subtly moved Parker's hand away. The following item up for auction is the once sensational diamond necklace, rumored to have originated from. The auctioneer spoke eloquently. Are you interested? I'll take a picture and send it to you. Parker leaned close to my ear like a lover's whisper. To outsiders, it seems that Parker must be deeply in love with me to be willing to spend so extravagantly. The starting price for the diamond necklace is $10 million. If it weren't for the bruises on my arm constantly reminding me, I would have almost believed in his deep affection. The price has already dropped to $65 million. $65 million. Is there any higher bid? $65 million once, $65 million twice. The auctioneer's face was filled with excitement. The auction price of a necklace skyrocketed nearly 7 times, and his commission would be substantial. Just this one deal would be enough for him to live comfortably for the rest of his life. $70 million. Parker leisurely raised the sign in his hand. The auctioneer became even more excited and asked the crowd if there were any more bids. Spending $70 million to buy a necklace, to everyone else, that just seems like a brain malfunction. Just as the final decision was about to be made, a voice came from not far away. $8 million. Kingston's voice rang out. Parker smiled and continued to raise the bid. $90 million. $100 million. Kingston followed closely behind. The audience was in an uproar. $150 million. Parker raised the bid without hesitation. I tugged at Parker's shirt hem, urging him not to act impulsively. $160 million. Kingston hesitated for a second before continuing. Watching the contest between the two of them, everyone was already numb. $180 million. Parker followed closely behind, without a hint of hesitation. His hand rested on my shoulder, and his gaze towards Kingston was filled with provocation. Kingston's eyes darkened, and he finally raised the bid. $19 million. Everyone's gaze returned to Parker, eager to see who would emerge victorious in this invisible contest. Parker innocently shrugged. Why are you all looking at me? The Kingston family is wealthy. I concede defeat. Congratulations to Kingston for spending lavishly to obtain the treasure. I believe Miss Nora will be very happy. The auctioneer was stunned by this scene, and it was only when Parker reminded him that he finally came to his senses. The diamond necklace sold for $190 million. Congratulations, Kingston. Congratulations, Miss Nora. Kingston then realized he had been tricked. Just as Nora reached the door, she heard these words and excitedly threw herself into Kingston's arms. Kingston, thank you. You are so good to me. Nora's face was filled with excitement. The words that were about to come out of Kingston's mouth were swallowed back, and he simply gave me a deep look. Everyone could see clearly that Kingston was tricked by Parker. Everyone's apprehension towards Parker intensified, and for the subsequent lots, as long as Parker placed a bid, basically no one dared to contest. There's no way around it. They've all been scared off by this smiling tiger. Even Kingston has capsized in the gutter, let alone this group of small fry. The last item up for auction was an unremarkable ring. However, as the auctioneer spoke eloquently, the starting bid for this ring was driven up to $1 million. As soon as I saw the ring, I was stunned. This ring was the wedding ring of me and Kingston. His is still on his hand, while mine was pawned long ago when the Jiang family declared bankruptcy. Why is it here? I looked at Parker beside me, and he smiled at me, showing his teeth. The moment Kingston saw the ring, he was already filled with rage. He turned to look at me, his eyes filled with pain, confusion, and mostly questions. That ring once again became the focus of the entire venue. Just because of Parker, the prices have been inflated again. $3 million. $5 million. Parker leaned lazily against the back of the chair, his eyes showing no desire for the ring. $7 million. Kingston continued to raise the bid. $10 million. No matter how much Kingston bids, Parker closely follows behind. The competition between the two once again intensifies. Kingston, I don't like this ring, just give it to them, Nora said softly. Kingston didn't even give her a glance. $30 million. The ring that was originally bought for $100,000 has now increased in price by several dozen times. This competition once again shocks my worldview. $40 million. The price has already been raised to $40 million. Kingston clenched his fist and said in a low voice, "Does Mr. Kingston like this ring?" Parker smiled casually and said playfully, "Is Kingston willing to part with it?" The same act was performed again. When Kingston called out $50 million, Parker comfortably shifted his position, leaning against my shoulder. The matter here was exaggerated and reported to Kingston's mother, who immediately called Kingston back. Parker leaned his head on my shoulder and said proudly, "Isn't it satisfying to see Kingston get his comeuppance?" He had a face full of praise me expression. "Why is that ring in your hand?" I asked. Parker answered this truthfully. "The pawn shop I went to is under the Gu family, and I happened to run into an acquaintance, so I called him. I will never ask him why he left that ring." After knowing Parker for so many years, I finally realized that he is not as harmless as he appears on the surface. He is cunning, knows how to scheme, and can manipulate people's hearts. Beside him, I watched as one weak group after another was swallowed by him, and debtors were driven to jump from buildings. He still sipped tea with an air of nonchalance. He has never shown mercy to those who plead and retreat. He said, "This world is one of the survival of the fittest. Today you are strong, they fear you, but one day when you are weak, just wait to be left with nothing but bones." He looked at my soft-hearted appearance and sneered, "I thought that after going through so much, you would have understood the survival rules of this society, but it seems that you are still as soft-hearted as ever, making it hard for you to achieve great things." Under Parker's training, I gradually became as hard-hearted as iron. Kingston has come to see me a few times, and his implication is nothing more than hoping I won't be with Parker. He said, "You've seen Parker's methods during this time. If he really takes the child away, do you think Parker would allow our child to stay? He has ways to make the child disappear without a trace. Is this the outcome you want to see?" I just smiled and invited him out. The conflict between the Gu family and the Hor family, in the eyes of others, would undoubtedly lead to both sides suffering heavy losses. Everyone advised Parker, saying that I am a femme fatale. Parker directly made an example of a few of the most boisterous elders, driving them out of the company, and declared, "Whoever dares to hire them will be an enemy of the Gu group." Dad's condition has worsened, and he needs to be sent abroad for surgery. Parker sent the Gu family's medical team over, along with my brother and mother. 2 years later, the Hua family went bankrupt. The Gu family was also severely weakened. While Parker was in a state of desperation, I found an excuse, disguised myself, and went out. The child is already over 2 years old and feels very unfamiliar to me. Perhaps it's the telepathic connection between mother and child. The child does not reject my touch. With the fake documents I had prepared long ago, I took the child abroad. And using his hacking skills, he erased all the routes taken, making it impossible for the Gu family and the Hor family to trace anything. Dad had already recovered a year ago and was living with Mom and my brother in the courtyard I had arranged. The Gu family medical team had long been bribed, and the safety messages sent to Parker every month were all manipulated by me using hacking techniques behind the scenes. I was playing with the child in the courtyard when my brother asked me, "Parker has been good to our family. If it weren't for his timely rescue, Dad would have been gone long ago. Isn't it a bit cruel to him?" He paused and continued, "If they find us..." I interrupted directly, "They won't be able to find anything. All traces in the country have been erased by me. I don't want to have any contact with them now." I didn't tell my brother that Kingston is a tiger and Parker is a wolf. Neither of them is innocent. At the beginning, the Jiang family went bankrupt, and Parker played a role in it. I also learned by chance that he was manipulating everything behind the scenes, all to swallow the Hor family. After learning all of this, I helped Parker deal with the Hor family while secretly gathering the lifeline of the Gu family. The Hor family went bankrupt, and I used evidence of the Gu family's tax evasion to exchange for the child. The Hor family had no choice but to agree. After the Hor family obtained the evidence, they directly posted it online, causing a huge uproar. The Gu family stock plummeted repeatedly, and Parker was overwhelmed with the chaos. As for Nora, I directly posted the video of her checking into a hotel with someone online. As a result, That man's wife came to the door and broke both legs. They always see me as a weak and easily bullied little rabbit, but they don't know that once the little rabbit gets serious, it can also be deadly. This peaceful life lasted for 3 years. I took the child to buy some groceries, preparing to cook a delicious meal for the family. As soon as I pushed open the door, my heart began to beat uncontrollably. The family members were tied up and kneeling on the ground. The room was filled with bodyguards in black clothing. The man sitting on the sofa had a smile at the corner of his mouth, but his eyes were extremely cold. I trembled uncontrollably all over. I wanted to turn and run, but my feet felt as if they were filled with lead, unable to move an inch. Parker looked at me mockingly, silently saying, "You can't escape." The story ends.